Myself, Dr. Viswanath Allamraju, Department of Mechanical Engineering, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering, Dundigal, Hyderabad. In this session, we are going to study friction and its applications. In previous session, we have covered what is the friction, what is the definition, terminology related to friction. The definition terminology, like a glimpse of those definitions and terminologies. What is the friction? What is the coefficient of friction? What is normal reaction? And what is fluid friction and non-viscous friction, angle of frictions and limiting friction and angle of repose. And here dynamic friction, kinetic friction, ladder friction and wedge friction, etc. we have studied. But in this session we are going to study once again, we are going to study the applications, how these friction playing a role in daily life, at homes and at outside, during fluids, during everything. What we are going to cover, the friction is the part of our life, is there in our daily routine lives. That's what we are going to make you to understand about friction concept. Let us begin here. The examples in our homes. Yes, the friction lighting a matchstick is one of the example here. So if we strike a matchstick against a rough surface to create friction. Due to friction, the matchstick, due to the heating effect of the friction. So in the case of forest fires, the heating effect, the friction becomes a necessary evil. What will happen in the case of this rubbing heating effect? Due to rubbing of the two bodies or two surfaces, develops a heat generation, develops a heat. That heat causes to catch the fire of the forest. So the forest fires are due to the friction. Now next daily example, here it's very simple example. To clean our teeth by using a brush, it is due to friction, the particles will be removed. That's what here. Now here, the sticky particles get stuck on our teeth and between the teeth and very difficult to be removed. The brushing action allows us to overcome the frictional force of the particles and get them relieved. There's what here, this figure. So brushing action, yes, what we are doing on our teeth is we are giving a friction. Due to causing of the friction, the particles will be removed. The next one is that, next example, the friction enables us to walk. Here, when the force of friction is opposite here, the direction. What will happen here? When the muscular force acts in this direction, when the friction force acts opposite to the direction of the force, backward direction, opposite to the direction of the muscular force. Now, when the feet is here, ideal condition, it occurs a static friction. It is a static friction. Okay, the friction developed here, that is a static friction. When under motion, the friction will be developed is a kinetic friction. Kinetic friction. It is a static friction here at this feet in ideal. When it is in dynamic under motion, the friction is known as kinetic friction. So finally, friction enables us to walk. Suppose if the coefficient of friction is equal to 0, suppose if there is no friction, what will happen? The sliding takes place. Sliding occurs. There is no motion. It will be sliding. So either the person is sliding, this sliding takes place, and the coefficient of friction becomes 0 when you apply the lubricating oil on the floor. When you apply the floor, when you are ready to walk, the friction is so minimum that it slides. Sliding takes place. Otherwise, the friction is there, the motion takes place. So the next example for friction helps. How the friction helps? To fix a nail to the wall. Yes, if the wall here, due to friction, this nail holds the surface of the wood. That's what when you are hammering, due to friction it enters. When because of the force you are applying here, that force develops, the shear force will be developed. But the grip between the wooden plank and the nail is due to friction. So that's why friction helps us to fix a nail into the wall. Next here, daily examples. Next example is that you can see is here. So funnily you can see it. We think that it is a mopping cloth, but it's not mopping, it is a dog. So the point is that here, the mopping surfaces, when you are applying to mopping stick, the particles will be removed from the floor by using when we apply the frictional force. The frictional force is used for dusting purposes. The next, ironing a shirt. The ironing a shirt, we apply the force. What will apply? There is a action between two contact surfaces, rubbing action, which is due to friction. So not only along with the applied force, there will be a heat generation takes place. That heat causes to press the cloth strongly. So make it straight and remove the holes on, remove the foldings on the cloth. So this is ironing a shirt. So the friction enables you to apply pressure on the wrinkled surface in order to iron. So without friction, the iron box will just slide through. If you don't apply the force, if you just move the iron box, what will happen? There is no, we can't remove the wrinkles on the cloth. So the pressure we apply is a factor affecting friction. So friction is directly proportional to the pressure. So next one example is that writing on surfaces. If you consider that when you're going to write on your surface, so there is a friction between. So because of that friction causes the ink flows on the paper. Here it is a common example of friction. So when we write on surface such as paper, the friction between the pen and the paper surface causes a few particles to stick on the surface, allowing us to leave marks on the writing words. This is a very important application of friction that we use every day we write. So that is one of the example of the friction. Okay, the next example here, some of the examples here. Working of an eraser. When you are erasing by using eraser, the lines and all due to friction, that is also the force of rubbing an eraser overcomes the frictional force of the lead particles to remove them. So therefore, working of an eraser is an example. And another one is walking on an oily surface. So the low friction offered by here, the oily surface will make you to slip because of the low friction, because of the oily. This can be used as an application of the friction, but while using oil as a lubricant is mainly used for to reduce the friction. Why? To reduce the friction moving parts, because the friction, if there is no lubricating oil between the rotating parts, what will happen? Generation of heat takes place because of the rubbing keep on. So that causes more heat generation, leads to wear and tear of the two surfaces. That's why to reduce the heat generation, to reduce the friction between the two surfaces we use here the lubrication oil. The lubrication oil makes the two components to rotate at the same time, reduce the heat generation and also reduce the friction. Mainly reduce the friction causes to reduce the heat generation, thus reduces the damage of those two components. Alright, that's what very important here. That's why walking lubricating oil is very important between two rotating parts. The next one is holding on to objects. You are able to hold because of the friction. If there is no friction, what type of friction? There are two types of frictions. One is kinetic friction, another one is static friction. Here when you are holding the object or any bucket here, water bucket or any object or any heavy equipment, there is a friction grip. So what will you do? Sometimes if there is no grip between, then we use the cloth. So the cloth makes to increase the friction. There helps us to hold strongly. Alright, so this is what holding on to objects makes us to. This is one of the applications of friction. Here, to hold an object, like a simple examples, bottle, glass, phone, a book, or you need friction. Yes, one. Okay. So what is the friction here leads? What is the? Okay, we can also go through a funny video that life without friction. Okay, what will happen? So the funniness is that if you're unable to hold, it won't be there. That object can't be on your hand because of the friction, lack of friction. If there is a friction, you can hold. If there is no friction, it slips down. All right. So these are the examples of the friction. The next example is that rubbing hands. If you rub two hands, it generates the heat. Yes, it generates immediately, instantly. You can generate the heat. So that is also due to friction. So this friction always has an effect of heat associated with it. So rubbing of the hands causes heat due to friction, which can keep our hands warm in winter season. Of course, also more heat will generate in summer if you rub more. You feel uncomfortable in comparison to rubbing hands in winter season. The next is that your belt holding your pants. This is also friction. Otherwise, the slipping that when your pant hipping takes place, no, slips down. If your pant is on your hips because of due to belt, and to hold having a friction grip. All right. Next one is that hats and caps on your head. That is also friction. What type of friction? Yes, I've forgotten to mention. That is a static friction. The static friction, because of the static friction, it is in stable static condition holding, able to hold, able to keep your cap on your head. Okay, those are all the examples of the friction. And one more thing, glasses on your nose also due to friction. Otherwise, if there is no friction grip, it slides down. Okay, it is due to static friction. Next, one more thing is that you can see in daily, we are all considering examples related to homely environment. The ring on your finger, there is a ring on your finger. Here it is held because of the friction grip. Otherwise, it slips down. Okay, next, flipping a page or one more with the ball bearings. The ball bearings are used to reduce the friction. Okay, it is an example of rolling friction. So far we covered the friction examples related to daily home environment. Okay, daily usages, how you are going to use. Okay, that means you can understand friction is our life. Already we are using the concepts, we are applying the friction concepts in our daily life. Right from rising early, that brushing your teeth to till going to bed. And sleeping in bed also due to friction, it is there. Otherwise, you slips down. All right. Due to friction, you are able to stable. What type of friction? Once again, it is due to static friction. Now, some of the examples coming to outdoor settings. Let us here, you can see coming down a kid's slide. Here, if you see the kids slide down, so when we slide down, a kid's slide, there is sliding friction involved. This friction stops us falling down immediately. Friction enables us to have the thrilling slide without any danger. So the point is that there is another thing is that if there is a slider, the slider will be there. The person here, the child who is sitting, it slides down. Okay, it starts sliding. There is an angle of sliding. Alright, the angle at which it slides, that is known as angle of friction or angle of repose. Yeah, angle of friction. Now, one more outdoor settings as I shown before, nail fixed onto a wall. So the friction between the nail and the wall holds together in its place. Is what type of friction? Again, static friction. It is a static friction. Okay. Next, walking on the hard ground, which I shown before here. Walking on the hard ground is a friction. Nail fixing the nail onto the wall is due to friction. And the next is that here the walking on hard ground due to friction. Okay, these are outdoors. Okay, walking on the hard ground. The friction enables you or enables us to walk firmly because of the friction. Yes, we are able to walk. And one more thing, is very difficult to walk on a marshy land or sand dunes. Such surfaces offer very little friction to walk. So marshy land is the land such a way that sliding takes place, very low friction. So very difficult to walk. And one more thing is that hard grounds is very too much hard, also dangerous. The friction is back, it hits or toe of the palm, toe of the legs. So the point is that here the coefficient of friction is high in the rough surfaces. It is in the smooth, it is slow. It's completely smooth, it is like oily surface, the coefficient of friction tends to 0. Now coming to sandpaper grinding. The sandpaper grinding here, it is very beautiful example and make us understand better. So because of the rough surfaces, sandpaper is having rough surfaces. This rough surface sandpaper will rub on any component. The contact between these rough particles and the particles of the particular opposite component makes us due to friction. If you apply the force, due to friction, fineness will be taking place. Okay, and also this edges fineness means polishing using sandpaper to ensure smoothness. So the rough and hard surface of the sandpaper breaks. What will happen? Removes the irregularity in the surface. thus reducing the roughness of the surface. This is a very common technique used to grind to reduce friction in wooden surfaces. So not only wooden surfaces, yeah, sandpaper grinding, and also sandpapers are highly useful for smoothing of fragile components also. Now next one is the cycling on the road. The friction enables you to start, stop, and also to turn a cycle. So the friction is there. Because of the friction, you're able to move. If the friction is not there, slipping takes place, sliding of the tire takes place. So the friction makes sure that we do not skid off the road. Otherwise, skidding takes place. So the irregularity, why they will keep irregularities on the tire outside circumference of the wheel of the tire? Because of to hold the grip, to increase the friction. So the irregularities on the tires are an important factor affecting the friction. So no, I don't want to make irregularities. I want to make it smooth like a tube. As you go for it, but there is a skidding takes place more, and the coefficient of friction is low, so reduces the speed of the cycle. So they provide the cycle with the much needed grip on a surface where the coefficient of friction is less. Okay, this is an important factor affecting the friction. Yeah, now here the coefficient of friction is less. What will happen? Skidding takes place. Okay, if the grips are there on the surface, that whatever it is there on the irregularities on the tire circumference of the tire, what will happen? Reduce the skid off position, or we won't be skidding off the road. The next very important, which we may not see it, but in the case of bicycle, we can see it how the brakes will hold the wheel. Now brakes on the motorcycle cars. So now brakes on your vehicle work on the principle of friction. The friction between the brake pads and the wheel provides enough friction. Brake pads and the wheel to stop the motion of the vehicle. You can see in the case of two-wheelers and also in the case of four-wheelers, there are different types of brakes are there made of the plain discs, so disc brakes, and also it makes of the multiple hole brakes. So there is a pads are there. It is a grip between pad and the wheel circumference. So if the pads, it depends on the pad material, you can, the friction, the coefficient of friction depends upon the material of the pads. So it is a more, disc brakes or the plain brakes or disc brakes. They are all what purpose? One more that there are different types of brakes here, also pneumatic grip or hydraulic grip and direct manually operated brake system. In the case of bicycle, it is manually, of course in the case of four-wheeler also. But the gripping between the pads and the wheel is a pneumatic connection. So in heavy vehicles, they'll use it for pneumatic brakes, such a way that skidding is very low. It's on the spot, a dot, you can apply the brakes. You can make stand the vehicle by using pneumatic brakes. So pneumatic brakes are operated with the help of air, whereas here the brakes are manual brakes or hydraulic brakes are with the help of the oil, not water. So compared to hydraulic brakes, pneumatic brakes are more useful or more standard or more advantageous in comparison to hydraulic brakes. Now coming to here, next example, gripping onto a basketball bat. Here baseball bat. Here a good grip is required, not only baseball bat and also cricket bat also. There is a gripping between cricket bat on your handle, the way between. If there is no friction is not there, there is no holding, slipping takes place. Sometimes when batman hits very fast, the way such a way sometimes slipping takes place because at that time there is no friction grip. So this is also there. It is between the hands, the grip between the hands and the bat. So the holding position and the roughness of the grip are two factors that affects the friction here. Next, tug of war. Again, you hold the tug of war. The meaning of the tug of war is some people on the left side and another side of the rope. Right side people, some people they pull the rope each other to show their strength. So in the tug of war also, what is required? Friction is required to hold the rope. Okay. The next, wear and tear of the shoe. The shoe wear and tear takes place because of the friction. The force will be applied such a way that there is a grip between here. Enables us to walk same friction here, especially the wear and tear of the shoe is because of when you're walking by wearing the shoe, there is a friction between the sole of the shoe and the floor. So if the more roughness is there, The more damage, more friction and more damage, and less is the smooth, completely zero. More smoothness means again slipping takes place, and of course less damage of the shoe. So the wear and tear of the shoe is because of the walking on a rough surfaces. Now another friction is that the ladder against a wall. It is a simple thing. Nowadays nobody uses ladders, of course. On the wall, instead of sliding, is a self. Some of the ladders you can keep on the floor without any sliding. The supporting person will walking to fix the bulbs, electricity bulbs or lights, etc. But the grip between here the floor and the ladder edges is due to friction. And the next is that pulley to draw the water from the well. Yes, this is a old example. Yeah, nowadays there is no pulleys to pull the water from the well using the pulley here. If there is no friction grip between the rope and the pulley surface, what will happen? Slipping takes place. That's why friction is important between the rope and the pulley. Make sure that we are able to grip onto the bucket. The next one is the friction welding. Yes, the friction that is a highly heat generation component. The between the tool and the surface of the metal which are going to be joined due to friction, the heat generation takes place. That heat causes to melt the parent metal and the base metal such a way that it will be joined together. So the temperature, due to friction, the temperature goes beyond recrystallization temperature. Thus melting point takes place and completely joins. So how powerful the friction? So the friction between the tool here, that is what the heat produced during the friction that helps to join the welding due to friction. That is called friction stir welding. Friction stir welding is the welding in which the two components will be joined by using the principle of friction. So far we covered two types of examples. One is outdoor, one is a homely environment, another one is outdoor settings. Now examples of friction in nature, we can see more. So what are the examples of friction in nature? Let us see here. So the gecko in your wall, on your wall. So the gecko lizard is the gecko means is the lizard. One type of lizard is able to climb onto surfaces vertically due to a very strong frictional force between the legs and the wall. Yeah, it is said to use van der Waals forces for creating such a large frictional force. Van der Waals forces. Yes, the lizard able to walk on vertical surfaces. There is a grip between the legs and also on the wall. Friction. That is due to friction grip. Okay, and some of not only that, and climber plants. And if you see the climber variety of plants climb onto surfaces very easily on walls due to frictional force. It holds slowly, it walks. So growing on, and generally they use rough surfaces to climb like the bark of trees, etc. So climb plants are good examples of friction in nature. The next examples of friction in nature due to friction causes, it is an evil. Evil means because friction causes forest fires. These forest fires can't be switched off or the fire can't be stopped by using the fire extinguishers. Here the way they're using fire extinguishers, that water is nothing in front of the heat generated in forest fires. So what they will do in US and all, they pour the water dump through helicopters, nothing unless until rain falls on that forest fire. Due to rain only the forest fire can be extinguished. What is that? It will be completely off. Otherwise, it completely catches fire. The way these people are using here in this finger, it is nothing. It will be evaporated parallelly. It can't be not at all useful to stop the fire. So this unwarranted, how it happens, these forest fires? Yes, because of the rubbing of two trees. Rubbing of the two branches of the trees due to friction develops the heat generation. That heat goes to catch the fire of the tree. Especially it happens in summer season. Yes, so these are due to friction. So that's why the friction causes unwanted fires. That's why it is an evil. Friction is an evil. That's what people says. And also friction also As I mentioned before, example, in friction steel welding, the heat generated due to friction between two tools, the rotating tool and the stationary component, such a heat generation that the parent parent product will be, or parent component will be melted. Okay, you see how much generation, how much heat generation takes place due to friction. So these are the, as I mentioned here, the forest fires. So this is what unwanted forest fires are a result of the friction caused while two trees rubbing each other. This friction causes a heating effect resulting in fires. So the next examples of fluid friction due to fluid, the friction in a fluid. So various examples: swimming in water. You are able to swim and able to move forward in water by swimming. It is due to friction. So the specific techniques like the angle of dive or hand movement, etc., to reduce this friction. So fluid friction enables to have a good workout. And the next one is water flow in the river. It is due to friction. Otherwise, water will be in stagnation. So here the water flow in the river, that friction is known as kinetic friction. The water flowing in the river experiences friction with the riverbed. The flow of water in the river is an example of friction. The next, water flow through pipe systems. There is, when water is flowing through pipe system, there is a friction factors. This friction factor, pipe friction, can be used by using Darcy's-Weisbach equation. Darcy's-Weisbach equation, or another equation is called Hazen-Poiseuille's equations. This is called friction through pipe flow. When flow through pipe system, what is the friction? So there we will study fluid friction is highly harmful here to reduce the head of the water or force of the water here. The fluid of friction also affects water flow through pipe systems. So fluid friction is mostly on the surface of the water flow. This type of friction is studied as pipe friction. Here, as I mentioned here, Darcy's-Weisbach equation. What is the Darcy's-Weisbach equation? That is 4FL V square by 2GD. That is head loss due to friction. What is the F here? That is a friction factor. L is the length of the pipe length, V is the velocity of the flow, G is the acceleration due to gravity, D is the diameter of the pipeline, and HF is head loss due to friction. What is the head loss? Suppose the level of the flow, the water doesn't flow, height, the wave flowing because of the friction. You may think that the friction helps us to flow more. No, friction reduces the flow of the water. Yes. Now, the flow of ink in pens, that is due to friction. The flow of any fluid across the surfaces, fluid friction, faces fluid friction. So the viscosity of the ink solution is optimized for a good flow rate. Next to lubrication. Lubrication reduces the friction. The fluid friction is generally less than the sliding friction, and this is used as an application friction. So the fluid affects as an interlayer between the two sliding bodies to reduce what? Reduce the friction. The next, especially this lubrication is highly useful between the two rotating components and when torque is transmitting. So when torque is transmitting between the bearing and the shaft, if you use lubricating oil, reduce the friction force and increase the life of those two components. Yes, that's why here the lubrication, yes, that is also due to, it helps to reduce the friction. Next, applying oil on door hinges as to reduce the noise. So we apply oil on door hinges to reduce the friction and ensure smooth movement. Otherwise, the movement is such a way that dry friction causes to damage the doors. That's why the oil converts dry friction into fluid friction. Dry friction means no oil, lubrication oil between two surfaces are moving each other. That's the dry friction. The value of the dry friction is more than the fluid friction. So because of applying the lubrication oil, dry friction converts into fluid friction, reduces the coefficient of friction and heat generation because of the lubrication oil. The next example is that the slow movement of coral reefs. So the mild movement of coral reefs that you see is due to fluid friction. Next, flow sauce from bottles. So you might have noticed that sauce does not directly fall from the bottle when inverted. So fluid friction reduces the speed of the flow. Like honey. If there is honey in the bottle, you pour directly. Or due to viscosity, it slows down. This is also what reduces the fluid friction, reduces the speed of the flow. The next is that cleaning of the surface using fluids. So fluids are generally used to clean surfaces as they reduce the friction. The dust particles sticking onto surface we already discussed. So movement of the ships or boats or fishes across the water due to fluid friction. Otherwise there is no movement, and the boats also, boats will be there only. Because of the friction, the movement of the body takes place. What type of friction? Here it is fluid friction. Okay. So and also fish able to move, even though fish body is okay, a very smooth body, but the friction is low because it is slides, that's why. Okay, the design of an object is an important, so that affects the friction. Next, so far we studied for fluid friction. Now there are 10 more examples for the air friction or air resistance. It's so important. The movement of aircraft helps the air friction. So aircraft experiences resistance due to contact with the air. It's not easy when opposition resistance that the air is coming. The object against to that moment is to want to move. A lot of friction takes place. So this is commonly known as, that is known as the drag force. The design of the aircraft is an important factor. This drag is very important to design the aircraft. So it affects the friction with air. So next one is that air resistance on your hands. So while traveling on a bike, you can feel it, this air resistance or to your motion. So you would have experienced the wind flowing in your body. This is air friction or air resistance. Not able to make it to move front when air is blowing opposite to you. So the air force is such a way, the drag force is so heavy that you may not, or you may unable to move also in front of the air force. Okay. The next is called skydiver. The skydiver experiences a huge force of friction while in the air. Okay, a person has to be physically fit to try such stunts. So skydiving is a good example of friction. Otherwise, what will happen if you are physically not fit? Death takes place. Okay, so skydiver is the very amount of, okay, you need to know the balance, and you're going to travel against the air. That equilibrium you have to maintain. The next one is that flying of the birds or bats due to air friction, and also they are light in weight perfectly because of to reduce the friction. The next is that kite. Very simple example, it moves. Not all designs of the kites will fly. Very few designs will fly. So kites design also very important to design the kite such a way it can fly. It is an art. So air resistance makes it possible for the kites to fly. Kite in air is an example of the friction, able to move. It gives different motions, and the person is the kite flyer moves the thread in proportional to that. He will balance such a way that it will move. Otherwise, it falls down. So that is also there, kite flying. The next is that the truss during a cyclone. The truss means in a cyclone, the wind blows at a very high speed. So you can see the air resistance making the truss swing across. So the wind blowing during cyclone such a way that it can cut off the trees, the branches of the trees, and electricity poles. Okay, so many disaster takes place because of the blowing of the wind. It is due to air friction. Next one is called flying of a flag. So a flag is whirling or fluttering because of a fluttering is because of graciously in the wind due to what? Air resistance. So swaying of a balloon or windsock. If you see swaying of a balloon, the balloon sways because of the resistance of an air movement. Without air resistance, it will fall down immediately. Next, windsock. The windsock is another example of friction that tells us the direction of airflow. So it works on air resistance and is able to float in the air wind flow. Now friction experienced by material while entering into the Earth's atmosphere, that is also there. This is the position the friction takes place. It catches the fire of the satellite, whatever you are in capsule. It's so important. So one of Indian scientists or US scientists collaboration that is called Kalpana Chawla is due to this is the friction experienced by material while entering into the Earth's environment, atmosphere. Is highly dangerous. The whole capsule will be burnt up on the spot, catches the fire. So, and also fuel, it also helps. So it's very important friction. So these are the way so dangerous. Every part of our life friction plays an evil, and also well-wisher also friction. So these are the examples I followed in this. I covered some of the examples in this reference. That is a dual site. I covered all these applications, and some of the applications I covered from the Irving Shams and R.C. Blur. Of course, the main examples I considered in reference 4. So with this, I can say thank you.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.